Han Li felt the surrounding air constrict around him, and he was stopped cold in his tracks before being sucked toward the giant sand beast's mouth by the massive vortex. A fierce look flashed through Jin Tong's eyes as she prepared to pounce at the sand beast, only to be stopped by Han Li, who cast an incantation seal onto her, transforming her into a ring that fitted itself around his finger. At this point, Han Li wasn't that far away from the giant sand beast to begin with, and instead of attempting to flee, he flew toward it instead, reaching its enormous mouth in the blink of an eye. Immediately thereafter, a burst of golden ripples erupted out of his body before spreading rapidly in all directions, instantly forming a golden spirit domain that was close to 20 kilometers in size, encompassing a small section of the sand beast's body within it. Everything within the golden spirit domain was instantly slowed down significantly, including the suction force surging out of the massive sand beast's mouth. As a result, Han Li was able to steady himself before using his thunderstorm wings once again, vanishing on the spot before appearing behind the mountainous sand beast's head amid a rumbling thunderclap. Immediately thereafter, he let loose a low roar as he adopted his giant mountain ape form. At the same time, a giant green sword appeared in the golden ape's grasp before it was swung at the sand beast with tremendous power. An incredibly thick crescent-shaped dark green sword projection swept through the air, containing countless dark green runes that were giving off bursts of formidable law power fluctuations. The mountainous sand beast immediately attempted to take evasive measures as it dodged to the side, and at the same time, a translucent yellow membrane of light emerged over the skin on the back of its head. However, with its enormous body and crippling effect of Han Li's time spirit domain, its evasive measures proved to be completely futile, and the sword projection struck the back of its head with immense power. The translucent yellow membrane flashed erratically as it attempted to keep the sword projection at bay, but it was only able to last an instant before it was severed. The crescent-shaped sword projection sliced into the sand beast's body, inflicting an enormous wound that was close to 1,000 feet in length, and yellow blood immediately came gushing out from within. But Han Li wasn't elated at all to see this. Relative to the sand beast's gargantuan body, this was nothing more than a minor gash. The giant sand beast let loose a thunderous roar as if it had been enraged by the injury, and bright yellow light erupted out of its body with countless yellow runes swirling within it. The yellow light expanded outward in all directions, instantly forming a yellow spirit domain that was close to 100 kilometers in radius. As soon as Han Li was encompassed within the yellow spirit domain, he immediately felt the surrounding gravity increase by several hundredfold. Before he had a chance to do anything, a thunderous howling sound rang out, and he turned to discover that the sand beast's tail, which wasn't encompassed within his time spirit domain, was sweeping toward him with devastating power. Upon entering the time spirit domain, the tail was slowed down significantly, but it was still sweeping through the air with astonishing speed and power. Han Li was also bogged down by the heightened gravitational force, so evasion was not an option for him, and he could only lash out with the giant green sword in his hand. A resounding boom rang out as the nearby space shuddered, and the golden ape was sent flying by the mountainous tail like a giant ragdoll before slamming heavily into the sea of sand down below. Half of its body sank into the sea of sand, while golden blood trickled down from the corner of its lips, and the webbing between the thumb and index finger of its sword-wielding hand had also been torn open, but that was the extent of its injuries. At this moment, the sea of sand was swirling like water, forming a giant vortex that enveloped the giant golden ape before attempting to suck it into the depths. At the same time, several sand beasts abruptly sprang out of the nearby sand to pounce at Han Li. These sand beasts weren't particularly massive, but they were entirely formed by sand, and they were giving off enormous golden immortal stage auras. At this point, the mountainous sand beast had also turned to Han Li and was chomping down upon him once again. At the same time, the flesh on either side of the gash on the back of its head was quickly fusing together, and it wasn't going to be long before the entire wound was healed. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he slashed his giant green sword horizontally through the air. At the same time, 3 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords emerged around him amid a flash of azure light before also sweeping through the air, unleashing bursts of peerlessly sharp sword chi that tore the surrounding sand apart. As a result, Han Li was freed from the sand and bright golden lightning instantly erupted out of his thunderstorm wings. However, his lightning power was suppressed by the sand beast's spirit domain, so it was only around 30% as effective as it normally was. In the next instant, Han Li vanished from the spot amid a flash of golden lightning before reappearing close to 10 kilometers away, which wasn't very far, but it allowed him to avoid the terrible fate of being devoured by the gargantuan sand beast. His thunderstorm wings then lit up once again, and he began fleeing rapidly into the distance as an arc of golden lightning. The giant sand beast let loose a thunderous roar of fury as it set off in pursuit, but its speed was slightly lackluster compared with Han Li's. After using his thunderstorm wings several times in succession, Han Li was finally able to fly out of the sand beast's spirit domain. With another flash of golden lightning, he appeared several thousand kilometers away, far away from the giant sand beast. Immediately thereafter, he swept a sleeve through the air, and arcs of golden lightning sprang out of his body to form a lightning teleportation array. With a flash of lightning and a resounding thunderclap, Han Li vanished into thin air, having teleported himself out of the giant sand beast's spiritual sensory range. The mountainous sand beast let loose a thunderous roar of fury as it slammed its giant tail into the sea of sand in frustration, causing all of the sand in a radius of thousands of kilometers to churn and rumble like turbulent waves. In the sky above a dense forest, a ball of golden lightning emerged amid a burst of spatial fluctuations, then expanded to form a golden lightning array. Han Li appeared within the array, having already reverted back to his human form, while the giant green sword and his 3 azure bamboo cloud swarm swords were circling around him. He swept a sleeve through the air to stow the swords away, then released his spiritual sense to inspect his surroundings, and he heaved an internal sigh of relief upon confirming that he had shaken the sand beast off their trail. Jin Tong immediately flew off his finger, then yelled, "Why did you run away, Uncle? You could have let that thing swallow me and I would have taken it down from the inside. That smaller sand beast was already powerful enough to injure you. The larger one would have surely been even more dangerous." "I wasn't going to let you take the risk," Han Li replied with a shake of his head. "Master is right. Safety should always be our top priority, so there's no need to take such risks," the Jade Pixiu chimed in. "Xiao Bai, are you saying that I'm being stupid and unreasonable? I think you need to be taught a lesson," Jin Tong yelled as she pounced onto the Han Li's leg, then threatened to bite into the white jade pendant that was hanging from his waist. The Pixiu immediately yelled in alarm before begging for mercy. Han Li picked Jin Tong up by grabbing onto her braids as if he were plucking a radish out of the ground, then scolded, "Be quiet, you two. We're already in the primordial land now, so we have to be careful." Jin Tong didn't say anything further, but she was still making menacing expressions as the white jade pendant. While the Pixiu had fallen completely silent, Han Li shook his head with an exasperated expression, then began to inspect his surroundings. They were well and truly in the primordial land now, and they were currently situated in a vast primordial forest that spread as far as the eyes could see in all directions. The world's origin chi here was just as abundant as some of the most prominent spirit veins in the northern glacial Immortal region, but it was rather chaotic and unstable. The Pixiu emerged beside Han Li amid a flash of white light, then closed its eyes while inhaling deeply as a blissful look appeared on its face. Han Li scanned the landscape down below for a moment, then descended onto a branch of a huge banyan tree. The tree was at least 1,000 feet tall, and this branch was very spacious, able to seat 10 people side by side with no problems whatsoever. These banyan trees were quite prevalent in some of the warmer and more temperate places on the northern glacial Immortal region, but this one was at least 10 times larger than even the most massive banyan trees on the northern glacial Immortal region, An intrigued look appeared on Han Li's face as he inspected his surroundings. Not only was this banyan tree absolutely enormous, all of the other trees that were recognizable to him were also far more massive than they were elsewhere. In fact, the same applied to all of the plants in this forest, making Han Li feel as if he had somehow been shrunk down to the size of an ant. Of course, there were also some smaller trees in the area, but there weren't many of them. "This place looks pretty cool," Jin Tong remarked, as she also inspected her surroundings with an amazed expression. "Are all of the plants in the primordial land so abnormally huge?" Han Li asked. "This is how things are everywhere in the primordial land. On the contrary, I would argue that the trees everywhere else are abnormally small," the pixie replied. Han Li nodded to himself with a contemplative expression upon seeing this. "Master, all of the demon beasts here are extremely violent and bloodthirsty, so make sure to be careful when traveling through the primordial land," the pixie continued. "All right, I'll make sure to be on my guard," Han Li replied with a nod. As soon as his voice trailed off, a ferocious roar rang out from nearby, and Black Ape that was around 20 feet tall with a dark red horn on its head sprang out from behind a nearby tree, then pounced at Han Li with its claws brandished. Han Li remained still on the spot as he flicked a finger through the air, releasing a streak of azure light that instantly split the Black Ape's body in half, sending blood splattering in all directions. "You certainly weren't kidding about their violent tendencies," Han Li remarked as he turned his gaze away from the Black Ape's remains. In any case, they had finally left the northern glacial Immortal region, so he didn't have to worry about the Heavenly Court for now. And that was a very pleasant thought for him. The primordial land was fraught with peril, but with his current powers, he was confident that he would be able to survive. After taking a deep breath, he flipped a hand over to summon two objects, one of which was the map that had been given to him by Worm 3, while the other was another map that he had purchased in Primordial Origin City. He inspected both maps briefly before stowing them away again, then swept a sleeve through the air to summon the green jade flying carriage. "Let's go," he instructed. The primordial land was a very dangerous place, but the fact that it was very rarely frequented by cultivators had to mean that there were many precious treasures and resources waiting to be uncovered. With that in mind, a sense of excitement welled up in his heart. Jin Tong and the Pixiu also seemed to be quite excited, and they immediately jumped onto the carriage. Han Li cast an incantation seal onto the flying carriage, and it immediately sped away as a streak of green light.